When you stop chasing, avoidants start crumbling. You ever notice how the more you chase someone who keeps running, the faster they seem to go? There's a strange dance that happens in dating, one that we don't talk about enough. It's the dynamic between the pursuer and the avoidant. You give, they retreat. You text, they need space. You want closeness, they need distance. And here's the kicker. The more you try to convince them of your worth, the more they subconsciously convince themselves you aren't. But everything changes the moment you stop chasing, not because it's a game, not because you're trying to manipulate them, but because you finally returned to your center. You stop reaching out to people who only meet you halfway. You stop begging for breadcrumbs when you deserve the whole damn. And what happens to the avoidant when the chasing stops? They start to feel the weight of their own absence. The silence you leave behind becomes louder than any words you ever spoke. They realize you were the one bringing the warmth. You were the one who kept the connection alive. Avoidants don't crumble because you punish them. They crumble because the pressure to face their own emotional walls finally becomes unavoidable once you're no longer there cushioning the impact. Here's the truth. Love isn't proven by how hard you chase. It's proven by how deeply you know your value, by how calmly you're willing to walk away from someone who isn't emotionally available, not in anger, but in dignity. And that dignified silence, that's not rejection, that's power. So stop chasing, not to break them, but to build you. When you're drawn to someone who keeps pulling away, your natural instinct might be to move closer. You feel the disconnect, so you reach out. You sense their emotional absence, so you compensate with more presence. It's a reaction rooted in care, in a desire to keep the connection alive. But what often goes unnoticed is that this very effort, this chasing, doesn't bridge the gap. It widens it. When you chase an avoidant person, you're responding to a deep fear within yourself, the fear of loss, rejection, or being unworthy of love unless you earn it. But what you're not realizing is that their avoidant behavior is being reinforced every time you run after them. Avoidant individuals often operate on a subconscious belief that closeness is unsafe. So when they feel someone moving in emotionally, their instinct is to retreat. The more you pursue, the more you confirm their need to pull back. To them, your pursuit doesn't feel like love, it feels like pressure. The pattern is subtle but destructive. You send the text to check in and they take longer to reply. You ask to talk about the relationship and they say they're too busy or not ready. You try to clarify, fix, or understand and they grow more distant. You think your effort is bringing clarity, but it's actually confirming their core fear. The intimacy means losing their independence or being consumed by someone else's emotions. Every time you chase, you inadvertently validate their narrative. They begin to feel justified in their distance. After all, if someone is constantly pursuing them, they don't have to take emotional risks. They don't have to invest. They can just sit back and receive while reinforcing their belief that closeness is overwhelming and suffocating. Your chasing becomes a protective shield for them. It saves them from vulnerability. You absorb all the emotional labor. You do the reaching, the fixing, the explaining, the waiting. But here's the deeper wound that chasing exposes. When you chase, you communicate, consciously or not, that you believe you have to earn someone's affection, that you're not enough unless you prove your worth by how hard you try, that love is something to be negotiated for, not something you naturally deserve. And when someone senses that energy, no matter how attractively it's packaged, they lose respect. Not because they're cruel, but because people instinctively gravitate toward those who hold themselves with quiet confidence, not anxious pursuit. Avoidants often don't know how to handle closeness, but chasing gives them the perfect excuse not to learn. It lets them stay safe, emotionally walled off, while you keep knocking on a door they're not ready to open. And the tragic irony is the more you try to prove your love, the less they feel it. Because true emotional safety doesn't come from pressure. It comes from space. The space for someone to come toward you willingly. Chasing steals that chance from them. It robs them of the opportunity to step forward and own their side of the connection. So what looks like loving harder is often just enabling emotional avoidance. Chasing feels like commitment, but it's often a subtle form of self-abandonment. When you stop chasing, something fundamental changes. Not just in the dynamic between you and the avoidant person, but within you. The entire emotional atmosphere shifts. You take your energy back, and with it, you alter the balance of power. It's not a power rooted in control or manipulation. It's the quiet, dignified power of reclaiming your self-worth. For a long time, the avoidant person has been in the emotional driver's seat. They decide how close the relationship gets. They decide when to open up and when to shut down. You respond, adapt, try harder. You follow their emotional lead, even when it leads you in circles. But when you stop chasing, that loop breaks. You remove yourself from the cycle of reaction, and in doing so, you send a powerful message. I am no longer available for one-sided emotional labor. The avoidant may not react instantly. In fact, initially, they might feel relief. Your absence may feel like peace to them, proof that the pressure is off. But over time, something else happens. They begin to notice the silence. They begin to notice the loss of your effort. They realize they're no longer being emotionally pursued, reassured, or chased, and that awareness shifts the emotional tension back to them. Now, instead of reacting to your pursuit, they are left with themselves, with their own thoughts, their own emptiness, their own emotional gaps. And for someone who has used distance to avoid confronting those inner spaces, this can be deeply unsettling. Without your chasing, they no longer have a buffer from their own intimacy issues. The discomfort they were projecting onto you returns to its source. Stopping the chase also reintroduces the concept of choice. When you chase someone, they don't have to choose you. They just have to tolerate your presence. But when you stop chasing, they're left with a question they can't avoid. Do I actually want this person in my life? That's when their real feelings start to surface. Sometimes that answer is no, and while painful, that truth frees you. But sometimes the answer is yes, and now they have to actively engage. Now they have to show up. This shift also sends a quiet but profound message about your standards. You're no longer just available by default. You're not offering your love endlessly, hoping they'll finally value it. Instead, you're saying, I know what I bring. I'm not here to convince. I'm here to be met. That kind of inner shift doesn't just change how they see you, it changes how you see you. You begin to realize you don't need someone to validate your worth. You need someone who meets it. So when the chase stops, the avoidant no longer has a role to play. The dynamic they were comfortable in dissolves. They're left to step forward, to take emotional responsibility, or to walk away. Either outcome brings clarity, and either way, you've stopped sacrificing yourself to hold together a connection that was never balanced to begin with. When you stop reaching out, stop explaining, stop filling every silence with effort, something unexpected happens. The absence begins to speak. And it doesn't whisper, it roars. Your silence, once mistaken for passivity or defeat, becomes the loudest statement you've ever made. For someone who has been accustomed to you always being the signal engine, the one who fixes, bridges gaps, and keeps the connection alive. Your absence creates a vacuum that's impossible to ignore. The avoidant person may not immediately understand what they're feeling. They may interpret your distance as indifference at first, because that's what they've trained themselves to expect from others. But over time, the lack of your presence starts to feel strange. It's not just the absence of texts or calls, it's the absence of energy. They no longer feel you thinking about them, worrying about them, orbiting them emotionally. That space you once filled with your concern and affection is now empty. And they begin to notice just how much of it you once occupied. The silence also removes their ability to deflect responsibility. When you are always reaching out, they could lean back. They could blame the pressure on you. You're too intense. I need space. Or you're always trying to talk about feelings. We're easy shields. But when you stop, when you pull your energy back without drama, They're left without a story to tell themselves. There's no emotional clutter to hide behind, just a quiet, gnawing awareness that something important is missing and that they're the reason why. And here's what most people don't understand. Avoidants are not emotionless. They feel, sometimes deeply, but they've developed patterns to protect themselves from vulnerability. Your constant chasing allowed them to stay safely behind those walls. Your silence? That's the first real confrontation they've had with the cost of their emotional distance. They start to see that what they thought was safety was actually isolation. In your absence, they replay the moments you were there. They remember the comfort, the kindness, the stability. And for the first time, they realize those things weren't just constants, they were choices. Your choices. Choices you made over and over to stay, to try, to care. And suddenly it hits them. Those choices are no longer being made, not because of anger or punishment, but because your self-respect finally demanded more. Silence doesn't beg. It doesn't explain itself. It simply allows space for the truth to rise. It's in this space that the avoidant begins to understand the emotional role you played, not as someone who needed too much, but as someone who gave too much without being met. Your absence becomes the mirror they never wanted to look into. And what they see in that mirror might be the first step toward change or a deeper retreat. Either way, it brings the clarity that your presence alone could never force. So while you once believed your words were what communicated love, it turns out your silence is what truly reveals your worth. It shows that your value doesn't come from how much you give, but from the strength it takes to stop giving when it's not reciprocated. And in that silence, they don't just notice you, they begin to feel the full weight of what they've lost. There's something undeniably magnetic about someone who knows their worth. Not in a loud, boastful way, but in the quiet confidence they carry. It's not about arrogance or pretending to be above feelings. It's about emotional self-respect. When you stop trying to prove your value to someone who isn't giving you the same energy, you send a powerful message. I don't need to be chosen by you to feel whole. That's the beginning of real attraction. Many people make the mistake of thinking that love is earned through sacrifice. They believe that if they give more, wait longer, or show just how committed they are, the other person will finally recognize their value. But it rarely works that way, especially with someone emotionally avoidant. To them, all that effort can feel like pressure. And the more pressure they feel, the more they pull away. Your love begins to feel like something they need to escape from, rather than something they want to move toward. But when you stop trying to prove yourself, when you start showing up for you instead of constantly showing up for them, you change the emotional dynamic entirely. You're no longer chasing validation. You're no longer asking someone else to confirm your worth. Instead, you're living as if you already know it, and that makes people look at you differently. When you're no longer desperate to be chosen, you become someone worth choosing. Self-worth isn't just about what you think. It's about what you do. It's in the boundaries you hold, in the energy you protect, in the way you walk away when something doesn't feel right. It's the moment you decide that being alone is better than being undervalued. That kind of confidence is rare. And for someone who's used to being emotionally pursued, it's disarming. It challenges their assumptions. It forces them to ask, why isn't this person chasing me anymore? What changed? That change isn't about them. It's about you. You've stopped hinging your self-esteem on whether someone stays. You've stopped needing their affection to feel like you matter. And ironically, that's when they often start noticing you more. Because now your value isn't wrapped up in their attention. It stands on its own. You're not trying to be impressive, you simply are. When you lead with self-worth, you stop attracting people who only respond to desperation. You start drawing in people who are drawn to your strength, your clarity, your peace. And for avoidance, that's a different experience. It invites them into connection without control. It offers closeness without pressure. And that's where real emotional intimacy can begin. Not from a place of chasing, but from a place of being rooted in who you are. So the more you act from self-worth, the less you have to chase love. Because the kind of love that's meant for you will ask you to abandon yourself to earn it. It will rise to meet you where you stand. Avoidant individuals often build emotional walls, not because they don't care, but because vulnerability feels unsafe. Somewhere along the way, they learn that closeness leads to discomfort, responsibility, or even pain, so they disconnect. They avoid deep emotional engagement, not necessarily out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of losing autonomy, fear of being engulfed, fear of being hurt. And as long as someone else is doing all the work to maintain the relationship, they never have to confront those fears. But the moment you step back, when you stop initiating, stop explaining, stop trying to fix the emotional distance, they no longer have your presence as a cushion. Suddenly they're left with the consequences of their own behavior. The silence becomes deafening. The absence becomes sharp. It's in that moment that their emotional walls, once solid and protective, start to feel more like a prison than a fortress. When you were chasing, they could keep projecting the illusion that they didn't need anyone, that they were fine without connection, that emotional intimacy was optional. But your withdrawal takes away the easy escape route. There's no longer someone bridging the gap, softening the tension, or making excuses for them. They have to face themselves. They have to look at the ways they've contributed to the emotional void. This is when the crumbling begins, not because you punish them, but because the protective structure they relied on no longer works. Your absence forces them to feel the discomfort they were avoiding. It's not a punishment, it's a mirror that reflects their own avoidance, their own fears, their own role in the disconnection. Without you there to fill the silence, they begin to experience the loneliness they thought they preferred. It's important to understand that this collapse isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. It comes in moments of reflection, in late night thoughts, in the space where your presence used to be, the text they don't receive, the support that's no longer there, the warmth that's missing. It's not about manipulation. It's about reality setting in. And the truth is, the emotional walls that seem to protect them begin to crumble, not because you broke them down, but because you stopped holding them up. Avoidants don't often realize how much they've relied on someone else's emotional effort until that effort is gone. And when they do, they're left with a choice: stay behind the wall and lose connection, or face their fears and step out. Whether or not they do is up to them. But your decision to stop chasing is what creates the space for that choice to exist. So, what does it really mean when you stop chasing? It means you stop performing for someone else's affection and start standing in the truth of your own worth. It means you no longer overextend for someone who retreats the moment things get real. It means the exhausting cycle of proving, pleasing, and persuading finally ends, and in its place you find peace, clarity, and self-respect. And yes, when you stop chasing, avoidants do start to crumble, not because you played a game, but because you broke a pattern, because your silence forced them to sit with the echo of everything you used to give freely. It's in that silence they realize the strength of your presence. It's in that distance they finally see what they took for granted. And whether they grow from that or not is out of your hands. Like your growth, that's already in motion. Never forget, you are not hard to love. You are just done chasing people who don't know how to receive love. Let them do their work. You focus on yours. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for choosing yourself even when it's hard. That choice to protect your energy, to honor your heart, to walk away with grace is not weakness. It's your greatest strength. Take care of yourself. Trust the timing of your life, and never forget, the love that's meant for you will never require you to abandon who you are to keep it. Thank you. Be well. Keep rising.